All I know is that this must stop, this divisiveness between our police and our citizens. We don't feel much support most days. Let's not make today most days.
The police chief of Dallas urging the citizens there to show officers the support they need now more than ever after that horrific ambush last night downtown so close to Dealey Plaza, where 5 officers were killed and 7 others were wounded. To offer his perspective via Skype from Washington, D.C., we are so happy to welcome in the host of the Right Side Forum, Armstrong Williams. Of course, he's a broadcast TV station owner, an entrepreneur, author, and opinion leader. And Armstrong, we always appreciate your time here on Newsmax Prime.
Congressman, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, especially on such a critical topic as the one that we're about to discuss.
It is troubling because in the wake of this horror, you hate to have politics enter into this, and yet it has. But I want to delay talk of politics for just a second to talk about the very human response in Dallas. The mayor of that city, Mike Rawlings, spoke earlier today calling for unity and an end to racial tension. Let's listen.
We will not shy away from the very real fact that we as a city, as a state, as a nation, are struggling with racial issues. They continue to divide us. Yes, it's that word race, and we've got to attack it head on. I will tell you, this is on my generation of leaders. It is on our watch that we have allowed this to continue to fester, that we have led the next generation down a vicious path of rhetoric and actions that pit one against the other.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So that is Mayor Mike Rawlings after the noontime press service, prayer service, I should say, in Dallas earlier today. And the mayor is suggesting a collective guilt. And I just got to tell you, Armstrong, I don't want to point fingers, and yet every time I hear the rhetoric of our current president, who we thought was going to be our first, quote, post-racial president, but sadly during these 7.5 years at times appears to be our most racial president in terms of he'll offer a verbal tranquilizer and then insert the jab. I'm sorry, I just have a real problem with some of the rhetoric coming from the President of the United States, even early this morning in response to this attack.
I think to lay this issue at the feet of the president is also not dealing with the real issue. And while you may not like the president's rhetoric, this is an issue that we've had long before President Obama was in the White House. And just to expect, just because the president happened to be an American who was elected, who happens to be black, that somehow or another it's an obligation of him to heal these wounds because he's black would be also outrageous. I think the issue lies in the fact is that the media and others have portrayed this mindset that it's only young blacks who are the victims of this police brutality. And there are people of all walks of life, white, Latinos, and others will tell you that they're victims of the same kind of violence and brutality, but it just does not lead in the press if it's something that involves race. This goes to the heart of the fact that when Dylan Ruth committed that terrorist attack on the Charleston 9 in Charleston, South Carolina, and when the police finally located him, they took him to Burger King to feed him. Can you imagine them taking some young Muslim kid or some young black kid to Burger King after committing that kind of heinous crime? I think it's the kind of messages that we send, the kind of messages what we can do and what police can do in these neighborhoods, whether it's poverty, whether it's in the inner city or whether it's Appalachia, and they feel they can pull their trigger when there's no reason to. There's no reason when you have both of your knees in some boy's chest and the gun is clearly is not in his hands and you choose to shoot him. It's clear if you have a concealing weapons license like I have one, it is clear in your training that if you stopped on any kind of infraction, the book tells you must immediately declare to that law enforcement officer that you're carrying a gun and that you have a conceal and carry permit. That kid did exactly what he was supposed to do, and for that kid to die and for law enforcement to kill him is inexcusable. The law enforcement and this code blue must stop protecting these law enforcement officers who give cops a bad name, because 95% of the time law enforcement gets it right. And this is an issue that law enforcement must clean up in their training and in their own house before they decide to pull the trigger to kill anybody and take that life, for the reason when they have everything in their control and they have everything they can in their power to defuse this situation, which we see law enforcement, they do every day.
Armstrong, you offered your perspective, and you said let's back off a little bit on a direct rhetorical indictment of President Obama. So let me clarify it. The concern I had this morning was the return to gun control, always and forever. In the midst of his remarks, here was what I found, quite frankly, objectionable. Let's watch and listen.
We also know that when people are armed with powerful weapons, unfortunately, it makes attacks like these more deadly and more tragic.
He went on to call for gun control. Members of his party are calling for it. Look, that is their point of view. But when we have the attacks in Chicago, and the president by and large has been silent about the number of attacks in Chicago, I just find that more than passing curious.
You know, and if the president was to wink, the situation and the crime in Chicago could clean up in a heartbeat. They know exactly what they need to do to stop this crime, but yet someone has made a decision that these lives are not as valuable as others. And it is inexcusable, and for the president to try to give a pass to Mrs. Clinton to help her during her campaign to further give reason to try to limit the guns in this society. Look, guns are not the issues, because if you talk about guns in many instances, which you will not see in the press, written or broadcast, that saved many lives and averted many situations that could have been dangerous or deadly. So guns are not the answer. And for the president to talk about guns is, in my opinion, like yours, is irresponsible. But what we've got to do on both sides of the political aisle, whether it's Republicans, whether it's Democrats, whether it's the White House, this is an issue we have to come together on. Let's stop this kind of violence where we continue to kill our own citizens, where people are afraid of law enforcement, they don't trust law enforcement, and they don't see law enforcement as their friends. And they cannot believe that there's a different standard of justice for law enforcement who kill for no reason at all, and there's no way you can justify or vindicate them. I mean, no one is above the law, JD, and you, as a former member of Congress, understand this better than anyone else.
Well, I understand something else, too, and you and I have talked about this privately, and we're both about the same age, baby boomers. You grew up in South Carolina, I grew up in North Carolina, and you first came to my attention with a memoir you wrote, The Power of a Good Name, talking about growing up in the rural South and how your dad's name and reputation carried the day in a situation that, where we came from, black and white segregated, we had a lot to overcome growing up and getting through the civil rights movement and understanding how we could live together as good neighbors and good friends. So we have a shared background that, boy, I look at what's happening today and I just fear this polarization that in essence almost undoes all of the change that you and I have lived through.
But you know, listen, it is unfortunate when you talk about the breakdown of the family, fatherless households, babies out of wedlock. The opportunities that were promised through the Great Society programs are not there. They've allowed these inner cities to become killing fields and drugs-infested fields. You can see it from Chicago to Baltimore, and a lot of young people are just angry. They have no opportunity, and these Great Society programs are only fueling the problem. It's not resolving the problem. And so tough decisions have to be made where entrepreneurship and enterprise zones and manufacturing and industry return to these communities that once had the dry cleaners, the barber shops, the grocery stores, instead of not what they have an alcohol base where you look around, there's nothing but alcohol stores. They don't have the role models like yourself and myself, business people, lawyers, talk show hosts, teachers, firefighters, law enforcement, who can get up in the morning that they can deal with and interact with and say, you know, I want to be that person someday. I mean, these inner cities have become wastelands. And until we change these wastelands and make people believe that they can have real hope in America and real opportunity, and help them find that opportunity by mentorship and through education, making sure we improve the school system, not based on someone's zip code, not much is going to change. You and I will continue to have this unfortunate and sometimes deadly conversation.
Well, as the police chief said this morning in Dallas, we have to be unified, and we have to look within ourselves. Armstrong Williams tonight from Washington, D.C. Armstrong, as always, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Congressman.
And we still want to hear from you. Give me a call at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. Still to come, from the West Coast, Michael Reagan. And from here on the anchor desk, retired police detective Tom Wadley. That and more as we continue Newsmax Prime on this Friday night. Stay with us.